Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be sharing an interesting article I came across to read just a couple of days ago. And this article is about what is the best way to learn a language and gets into deep insight of this very interesting topic, and I want to share it with you in this video. So, the best way to learn a language, according to a research that has been published, the finding of this research has been published on the medium.com website, and the author is Dr. Gavin Lamb. The title of this article is The Trifecta of Effective Language Learning. Learning another language is not just about the acquisition of a new skill. So we have a few questions. The first one, what are the differences between first and second language learning? Why do some people seem to have a knack for learning languages, while others struggle or even resign themselves from the task entirely? How does age matter in learning another language? I can give a personal answer to this question shortly. How do our own unique individual differences, like learning styles, affect our ability to learn a new language? Another question is, what role does conscious attention play in language learning? Can we just soak up the language like a sponge if we immerse ourselves in the language, or do we have to pay attention to the details in order to learn? There are other two questions. How does your first language influence how you learn a second language? And the last question is, and what are the most effective language learning strategies in becoming a successful language learner? So, let's call an everyday language learning an adult learner who is seeking to achieve long-term success in a language that they began learning in high school or later, and this is my case. And let's call success the ability to use the language for effective communication in a wide range of situations and settings, and in order to achieve a range of goals that you are already comfortable accomplishing in your first languages. In other words, think of being able to use the language as a vehicle for communication in order to be able to communicate with other people. With different people, family, friends, teachers, doctors, bosses, colleagues, employees, bartenders, grocery store clerks, waiters, or through different genres, spoken discourse, professional emails, medium post, or on the phone, or lastly on social media. In different places, home, school, work, hospital, conferences, recreational settings, and also English language classroom. For different action, persuading, narrating, reporting, instructing, joking, warning, praising, blaming, asking, requesting, agree, disagree, complaining, flirting, gossiping. All these questions, though, are just a few of those being posed by second language acquisition, SLA, researchers in a number of ways over the past 4 decades. The field has been in existence, questions which have led down all sorts of paths in their effort to peel off the layers of a language learning onion. And it has been a difficult onion to peel, to say the least. What is the big picture? But for a language learner who wants to know what the research says about the best way to learn another language, how can you begin extracting practical insight from jargon packed research articles, or should you even bother? A lot of the research in SLA is very focused, whether it be on how specific languages are acquired by learners from certain linguistic and cultural backgrounds, investigating the development of language competence from more cognitive or social theoretical perspective, or critically examine the ever-expanding language learning market that seeks to profit on the desire among pretty much everyone on the planet to improve their proficiency in other language. But rather than spending too much time, all of that, I'd like to zoom out a bit, get a bigger picture of SLA, and hopefully offer up a few insights from the SLA research for the average everyday language learner. And this is because I feel the research on language learning has not only helped me to get a better grip of what the process of language learning involves, but has also helped me see how I can begin relating to, the numerous theories, findings, and insight in SLA to my own language learning practice. Wading through the swamp of SLA research can be a bewildering experience, and at first, seemingly, in all small supply and concrete strategy for language learning. And this is because of much research is concerned with the complex social and cognitive processes involved in language learning, and not so much with prescribing practical strategies for learners, although there is a growing body of research on language learning pedagogy, or pedagogy, I suppose, aimed at providing useful insight for teachers and learners. Andrew Cohen, who researches strategy for learning and using a second language, defined a language learning strategy as thoughts and actions consciously chosen and operationalized by language learners to assist them in carrying out a multiplicity of tasks from the very onset of learning to the most advanced levels of a target language performance. And these include language learning strategies like strategies for ensuring the learning, practicing, and use of a new language in an already busy life, strategies for monitoring one's everyday language learning and use, and strategies for remembering vocabulary deemed relevant and valuable. But in this article, I've tried to pull some of the biggest clumps of insight from a range of different research approaches in the field. And this insight have helped me to see the language learning process from diverse vantage point, and perhaps most importantly, begin making connection to my daily practice as a language learner. A trifecta for effect language learning. And these three approaches to language learning are somewhat obvious but have been described in various ways by researchers coming from all sorts of a different perspective in SLA. Number one, learn the language in context. Second, learn the language by using it for specific purposes. And the third one, learn the language through face-to-face interaction. How to learn the language in context? What do I mean by learning a language in context? I think SLA researcher Bonnie Norton puts this well when she writes, second language learners need to struggle to appropriate the voices of others. They need to learn to command the attention of their listeners. They need to negotiate language as a system and as a social practice. And they need to understand the practices of communities with which they interact. This is all to say, language should be seen as an embedded social and cultural practices, and finding language learning resources that give you access to these different interpersonal, linguistic, and community contexts when learning the language is a good way to go. The second, learn the language by using it for specific purposes. Learning by doing seems to be one of the keys to learning another language, as it allows people to both gain knowledge of the various aspects of the language as well as gain experience using the language. So, to achieve the benefit of a task-based practice, SLA research, John Norris writes, we must first accept that language develops not as an accretion of discrete bits of knowledge, but through a series of holistic experiences. To using the language from the very first day and for purposes that allow you to experience the language in meaningful ways by doing specific tasks with the language, you can build your language competency up holistically as one holistic experience at a time, rather than just one noun or verb at a time. And the third one is learn the language in a face-to-face interaction. Lastly, learning language in interaction with other people, real-life human beings, is an obvious point for anyone who has had the experience of studying a language on their own prior to a trip, only to be met later with disappointment when they struggle to start up a simple conversation with a native speaker. And, I experiencing something like that when it happened to me to go to the United States for the first time in 1982. And, the knowledge of the language, the English language in that period was not so good. Why the process of language learning should involve all kinds of receptive interaction with literature, movies, podcasts, social media, and more, the original home of a language learning is in face-to-face conversation. Having to negotiate meaning with other speakers on the fly seems to be one of the key ways to develop our language ability. And with the range of a new online language, learning resources now available for motivating language learners to take part in second language interaction. This is getting much easier to do. Sorry. Develop a daily practice, hone your language learning intuition. Through systematic research, we can provide fantastic descriptions and theory of the various facets of the language learning process, but things get a bit less crisp when we begin making general prescriptions for how best to go about learning another language. So, the science of SLA can tell us a lot about both the universal aspect of language learning as well as the individual idiosyncrasies that make each of our language learning journey unique. The key for the language learning, however, is to become a researcher of yourself in a way bridging your knowledge of both the language and the language learning process along with your own experience in developing a unique path towards your language learning goals. This might be a good point to ask what your goals are exactly. Have people think you second language pronunciation is native or nearly so? Get the second language pragmatics right in numerous speaking situations. Have only negligible grammar errors in your oral language. Have the second language vocabulary trip off your tongue relatively effortlessly. Take an active part in a meeting conducted entirely to a second language. Read and critique work in your field of interest in second language. Express yourself in written language at a professional level in second language. So the journey of learning another language is just as much a journey in the learning to develop a daily practice, just as with variety, meditation, and exercise. By this, I mean that learning another language is about fostering the energy, motivation, and consistency that any kind of skill learning requires of someone. Perhaps most importantly, this is why whatever path you choose towards learning a new language, the most effective one will be the one that most resonates with you, and as a consequence, will be the one that you stick with for the long haul. Intuition are formed at the crossroad of knowledge and experience, says H.D. Brown, a researcher of a second language acquisition. By learning about the language learning process, pay attention to our own experience as a language learners, and by constantly taking risk on our language learning journey that might reveal insight onto our language learning practice, we can begin developing our intuition about how the best to begin and persist on one of the most awesome, enriching, and rewarding journeys there is, if I might say so myself. The process of language learning is complex as the individual quirks of people who embark upon the journey of learning a new language, and as complex as the multitude of language and language learning situations that people find themselves in around the world. So each language lesson is in some ways a unique drama. One researcher writes and understanding these unique dramas that populate our lives as a language learners is what I think makes both researching SLA and learning another language so fascinating and inevitably challenging but rewarding process of self-discovery. Talking about of self-discovery, I just want to share with you an anecdote. I was working for a consultancy firm, and I used to travel a lot. After dinner, I used to switch off. In that period, in the hotel were the satellite antenna. So we were able to watch BBC World News or the CNN. At the very beginning, it was very difficult for me to understand the overall meaning, even the overall meaning of, the news. But I persisted. I persisted watching, the news for months and also years. And it was a very rewarding process of self-discovery when I realized that I was able to understand everything. It was beautiful. Not just a technical fit, but an expansion of perspective. Learning another language isn't just about the acquisition of a new skill. Language learners know from their own experience that it is also an expansion of perspective of the world they live in. And this point is echoed in Bialystock and Akuta's 1994 book on second language acquisition. Sorry. Okay. Learning, we are almost, at the end of this quite interesting article. Learning second language is not simply a technical fit. It is an expansion of a perspective. We live in a world community that speaks more than 7,000 distinct languages. 7,000. And we cannot hope to understand ourselves and our own place in this world without understanding the enormous impact of a linguistic and cultural diversity on the human social condition. Recognizing the implication of a learning a second language and understanding something of the process of its acquisition propel us toward this goal. So just remember that when cultivating your daily language learning practice, the important thing is to maintain a constant sensitivity to your own unique insights and intuition about your language learning journey as you build it up on one experience at a time. So, best of luck to all the English learners, include myself. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you find this article extremely interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you all the best for this holiday summer. Thank you so much.